The following program is suitable for all audiences.
Garoppolo moving to his left, looking towards the end zone. He throws. Touchdown.
I think you see a team that again just getting started. I think they've made a change of quarterback. We're kind of looking at them a little bit more in depth. We saw them last year, both in practice and in a preseason game, as well as from the New England film, and a little bit at the end of this past game. See a really good running back in Carlos Hyde. I think they've had an influx of offensive linemen in there. They've got real speedy guys at wide receiver, in particular a good one. Defensively, I think they're talented up front. They've got some first-round picks up there. So that's kind of how I see them, right now, kind of a rough draft of them.
Cheers, Bears fans! This is Bears on Tap, our weekly look at the Chicago Bears' upcoming opponent. I am Aldo Gandia, and you just heard head coach John Fox offer up a quick assessment of the 1-10 San Francisco 49ers team that comes into Soldier Field Sunday, hoping to introduce the Jimmy Garoppolo era with a win. Welcome to all of you and all of the 49ers fans who want to hear our special guest, the host and producer of the Better Rivals podcast and Niners Nation writer, Oscar Aparicio. We'll welcome him on board in just a minute or two, but first, my opening thought. I'm hearing a lot of talk about Bears fans not showing up Sunday and for the rest of the Bears home games this season. I've kidded about it, but the truth is I want to be there Sunday, and for any game I can get a good seat for. Now it's about player evaluation, not wins and losses. Don't get me wrong. I want to see the Bears beat the 49ers. I want to see them crush them. That will probably mean that individual players played well. I already have enough evidence that a John Fox coached team in Chicago is never going to be a consistent winner. So now it's about individual player evaluation. I want to see evidence that Mitch Trubisky can correct the passing mechanic issues that we've witnessed recently. I'd like to see Tariq Cohen top the season-high 160 all-purpose yards he had back in Week 1. Love to see Adam Shaheen excel against the 49ers defense that has performed well against tight ends this year, but is tied for third in the NFL with touchdowns allowed to tight ends. I've got to see Eddie Jackson bounce back from that horrific game against Philadelphia. And would like to see the players from the 2016 draft like Jonathan Bullard, Nick Kwiatkowski go from being possibilities to sure things. These are just some of the players Ryan Pace has drafted the last 2 years that must develop or will be facing years and years of awful football. So I'll be there Sunday evaluating, hoping, and chanting "Fire John Fox" whenever he makes another stupid decision. Okay, as promised, with me now is the host and producer of the Better Rivals podcast and Niners Nation writer, Oscar Aparicio. Oscar, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you for being on. All right, tell me about this, 1-10 now, San Francisco 49ers team? Are they as bad as that record indicates?
They're a little better than 1-10, but I'm glad that our record has us below 1-10 because, as we've been saying throughout the year, we've been wanting to tank to get draft position. And, we're not going to make the playoffs this year. We're not going to be anywhere near it. So we really want to get up in that draft position area. We ideally want to get into that 2 spot, which is where we're in right now. So, of course, earlier in the year, we had a record where we won, or actually where we lost 5 games by, combined a ridiculous amount of points, all was 1 score or less. And so it all kind of panned out perfectly for that draft position. And so it's an elegant tank. If we're going to lose, we're going to lose the games kind of elegantly. A few have been ugly, but they're a little better than 1-10, but they're still not a good football team.
I hear you. Now, we here at the Bears Barroom Radio Network, we talk a lot about that the statistics aren't important. The win and loss record isn't important. What is important is what you see on tape from these players. So tell me what overall, before we get into a position-by-position breakdown, overall, are you seeing tape on the 49ers that impresses you?
I think we are. At this point of the season, you're definitely in player evaluation mode. You are not in, oh my God, what's going to happen with the playoffs and what about this? We kind of know what this team is, and now we're really thinking who's going to be there for the long haul, who's going to be there next year and the year after. And, of course, I think the two best players on the 49ers team right now are on defense. It's going to be DeForest Buckner and Reuben Foster. What they put on tape is going to be really, really good. Of course, on offense, you see Kyle Shanahan's scheme being run to a great degree of, non-efficiency because we don't have a lot of talent. But you definitely see the scheme really pop out on tape. You see that with C.J. Beathard being now the second-ranked quarterback based on Pro Football Focus charting across rookies. So Deshaun Watson being number one rookie and C.J. Beathard being the second one. And a lot of that has to do with Kyle Shanahan's scheme. We're able to get some kind of predetermined deep shots in there. You see the Yankee concept a whole heck of a lot on film. You see some compliments to that. And so you do see some good things on tape. The foundation is there. Right now, it's just the talent-starved roster.
Now, tell me a little bit about Kyle Shanahan in his first year as head coach of the 49ers and also about Lynch, the new general manager. Are they living up to expectations?
I mean, so far they are because there really were no expectations going into this year. This was a team that needed a complete and utter overhaul, and that's exactly what Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have done. They turned over a huge portion of the roster. They've turned over 50% of the roster. So at this point of the season, now especially considering injuries, you're probably talking about 30% of the roster that was held over from previous regimes, the Balky, Harbaugh, Kelly, kind of regimes. And so they've got a huge turnover process in front of them, and it's still happening. I mean, we're signing people on waivers that are coming in and starting the next week. We signed Sheldon Day from Jacksonville, claimed him off waivers, and he came in and was a kind of a plug-in depth player that played pretty well last week. So this is definitely a process. Because there were no expectations this year, I think they could have gone completely defeated and they would still be okay. I think once you start getting into next year and the year after that, that's when you're going to see a bit more pressure since they've got 2 or 3 years to get into their system.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's go position by position. I want to begin with the quarterback position because the Jimmy Garoppolo era begins Sunday at Soldier Field. The kid is from Eastern Illinois, and in fact, I think he grew up in Arlington Heights, which is where I happen to reside. So it's going to be interesting to see his play. I want to play a soundbite from John Fox's news conference on Wednesday, I believe it was, where he talks about Jimmy Garoppolo and the fact that they got to see him up close last season when they spent almost a week practicing with the New England Patriots. This is what Coach Fox said.
I think in that setting, you get to mingle with him some. I think he's was held in high regard there amongst their coaches and amongst their organization. So there's been trade talks for some time since that time. Obviously, San Francisco pulled the trigger on it. But real positive things, and from ability-wise, he's an accurate passer. He's got decent mobility, and he's a smart guy. I think to play in that offense and be exposed and be around Tom for any length of time, I think he's got a good background in the league.
Oscar, tell me what your take is on Garoppolo based on what you've heard.
So Garoppolo is a whole new hope for the 49ers. He is the franchise quarterback that this team has been lusting after since it seemed like Colin Kaepernick was not going to pan out. He exhibits the type of skills that you want tailor-made for this Kyle Shanahan offense. He processes the game very, very well. He has a very quick release. He is a passer first, but he has the mobility to move around the pocket and generate plays out of structure. We saw that in limited plays last week. He came in for 4 plays, one of which was nullified due to penalty. He was 100% in his completions, 2 for 2 for 18 yards, and one of them, of course, was a touchdown out of structure while he was rolling to his left. These are the kinds of things that you want to see from Jimmy Garoppolo. And there's a reason he was drafted but in the second round. And those are the types of things that you can see now. Whether or not he's going to be able to put it together for a whole season, who knows? But at least initial returns are incredibly positive.
And let's talk now about his offensive line and what kind of job they've been doing this season in terms of protecting quarterbacks. On the 49ers website, they've got the depth chart having Joe Staley starting at left tackle, at left guard Laken Tomlinson, the center Daniel Kilgore, right guard Brandon Fusco, and right tackle Trent Brown. Are you expecting all of those guys to start, and can you give me an overview about their performance this year?
Absolutely. I think the top line for the offensive line is that it is absolutely abysmal. It's really, really terrible. It's one of the reasons the team has been so bad this year. C.J. Beathard has been basically a glorified tackling dummy over the last couple of weeks. The one time where he has been kept upright was a couple of weeks ago when the team won against the New York Giants. Now, of course, the Giants have a very, very low pressure rate, so it wasn't necessarily that the offensive line performed well. It was that the Giants' defensive line was just not very good. You've got C.J. Beathard who's able to stay upright. All of a sudden, he looks like a competent NFL quarterback. But the offensive line in general has been the Achilles heel. The weak spots, by and large, are going to be the left guard and the center, Laken Tomlinson and Daniel Kilgore. Joe Staley is on the decline of his career, but he's still a very, very good, serviceable left tackle. Trent Brown is actually injured. He's the right tackle. He's actually going to have a brace on his shoulder, probably going to play, but whether or not he's able to play the whole game is going to be kind of up to the football gods. If he doesn't play, then you're going to have Zane Beadles, who is actually a backup guard that's going to kick out to tackle because our other two backup tackles are injured. So, I mean, you're dealing with a patchwork offensive line, and it's not going to be very good because that person, whomever it is, whether it's injured Trent Brown, who is actually very good, or a Zane Beadles, is going to be going up against Pernell McPhee, which is probably not going to end well for, definitely not for Beadles, but Brown can probably handle him. But really in the middle of the line, you've got Laken Tomlinson and Kilgore. Laken Tomlinson and Kilgore are very, very bad. I mean, Tomlinson is just not a quality starter. I wouldn't even say that he's back upable at this point. He was acquired via trade from the Detroit Lions for basically peanuts, and we plugged him in because our original left guard, which was first-round pick out of Stanford, a guard, he was injured, on injured reserve, and now all of a sudden you've got, kind of, again, patchwork that you've got to put together. Daniel Kilgore is much better in the run game than he is in the pass game. And they're going to be going up against, Goldman and Hicks. That's going to be a point of emphasis is we're going to want to run away from those two people if we're going to run at all. And in the pass game, it's going to be dangerous because you are going to be able to penetrate through the middle of the line and get to Garoppolo. So the offensive line is definitely going to be a weak spot for the 49ers, and it's more likely going to be over that center left guard area.
Yeah, Tomlinson, we saw a lot of when he played for the Lions, and he was definitely a huge disappointment there. All of my sources in Detroit were really happy that they got anything in return in a trade for the guy. So I was surprised that Lynch pulled the trigger on that deal.
Well, so you remember that Martin Mayhew is in the 49ers front office, and he was brought on, of course, when John Lynch was hired. John Lynch also hired a bunch of really, really smart people to put around him in the front office. You've got Martin Mayhew, who used to be the GM or in the front office at Detroit when Tomlin was drafted. And then you've got Adam Peters, who was in Denver, who is now basically helping to run the stuff in San Francisco. So it's because of that relationship with Martin Mayhew that we ended up with someone like Laken Tomlinson. And honestly, he is just not good. He's just not a good football player. And it's going to show, I think, against the Bears.
And let's talk about the running attack. The 49ers are ranked, I think it's 23rd in the NFL in team rushing, but they have a pretty healthy run per average at 4.3. So is Carlos Hyde playing well? And the reason that they're ranked 23rd is simply because they are forced to pass the ball more often?
That's part of it. I mean, again, you have to remember that everything flows to the offensive line. So the offensive line isn't playing well. They're not always able to sustain their run blocks. And they're still adjusting to Kyle Shanahan's outside zone, even though this year Kyle Shanahan has run a lot more inside zone than he's used to, just because Carlos Hyde is a better inside zone runner. Carlos Hyde is performing relatively well this year. He is a very, very tough inside runner. He gets a lot of yards after contact. He's tough to bring down on first contact. And he's going to be now involved in passing game quite a bit more. I think he's got something like the second or third most targets over the last weeks for running backs. So he is definitely going to be a big focal part of the offense. Now, against the Bears, I think we're probably not going to see inside runs because you've got a really good defensive interior. You've got, Goldman, you've got Hicks, and you've got Unrein. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Unrein. I think it's in Spanish, right?
Yeah.
But that's going to be a pretty stout defensive interior. So I think you're probably going to see more outside zones try to get to the edge of the Bears defense. And our actual running back that runs those runs better is going to be Matt Breida. He's an undrafted guy out of Georgia Southern. He is an amazing find as an undrafted free agent. He is ridiculously athletic, very, very fast, and you might see a healthy dose of Matt Breida as well. Matt Breida is actually a more efficient runner per play, and he's probably going to take over the starting running back spot next year when Carlos Hyde ends up departing in free agency. But if the Niners can keep their ground attack on schedule, and if we're able to rip off 3, 4, and 5 yard runs and stay on schedule on first and second down, it may not be a good thing for the Bears.
Matt Breida, we'll be keeping a close eye on him. Now, tell me about the wide receivers. Aldrick Robinson and Marquise Goodwin are the starters according to the depth chart here. Tell me how they've been playing this season.
So Marquise Goodwin is actually having a career year, which means he's playing a little, above average. He's not a world beater by any stretch, but he's on pace for career yards and career receptions. He is our de facto number one right now, and he's not going to set the world on fire, but he is going to be good for a deep pass or two a game. He's of course ridiculously fast. He was an Olympic level sprinter. He was out of Texas. He's a guy that you need to watch and you need to account for, especially if he's running that deep post. Now, Aldrick Robinson is only playing because of injury, and he is not someone you need to worry too much about. I wouldn't say Aldrick Robinson plays a whole heck of a lot, to be honest with you. Lewis Murphy and Kendrick Bourne are actually players that are going to get more snaps than Aldrick Robinson. They're both bigger wide receivers, and you need a bigger complement to Marquise Goodwin. But Aldrick Robinson and Lewis Murphy, of course, is a journeyman wide receiver. He played with the Raiders most notably, and he caught Jimmy Garoppolo's first touchdown as a 49ers quarterback. So you're probably going to see a little bit more of them. The player that I'm most interested to watch is going to be Trent Taylor. Trent Taylor is our slot wide receiver, and he, again, is a rookie as well. He was drafted in the 5th round. He is more of your slot, shifty, run the whip route, run the arrow route kind of wide receiver. Oftentimes gets compared to Amendola and Wes Welker, probably because he's little and because he's white. And you're going to see, we always make jokes on our podcast about how, because he's white, he's got a lot of grit, and he brings his lunch pail to work. He's got a high football IQ and all the euphemisms that basically mean he's a white little wide receiver that runs into the slot. But he's probably, depending on Garoppolo's comfort level with that kind of wide receiver in the scheme, he might be Garoppolo's security blanket. And so I look to see what happens there, especially because when you get the Bears going into nickel, you've got Fuller on the outside and you've got LeBlanc on the inside. The LeBlanc-Taylor combination, or the LeBlanc-Taylor matchup is going to be one that's interesting because LeBlanc's played pretty well. And Prince Amukamara is going to be on the other side. So I think if you're going to target someone, you're probably going to target Fuller, and that's more than likely going to be Goodwin.
Excellent. Okay. Over at the tight end position, you've got George Kittle, Garrett Selleck, and the name that we know very well here in Chicago, Logan Paulson. Hopefully for you guys, he's not seeing much of the field.
No, he's not. The joke is his name is Logan Paulson because every time we need to clear up a roster spot, he's the guy that gets cut. And then we bring him back a couple weeks later, because his long flowing locks are just, apparently something you can't be away from for too long. But he's the blocking tight end. He's only there because, again, we've had injuries at the position. George Kittle, you're detecting a theme here. He's a rookie. Drafted him in the 5th round. He's getting a lot of snaps, and he is a tight end that still needs to put some things together. He's a very athletic tight end. He is a better receiver than he is inline blocker right now, but he still does both of those things fairly well. He's had some problems with drops this year, George Kittle, and so it'll be interesting to see if he's able to kind of cure the dropsies and what he's able to do against Chicago. Now, Garrett Selleck is going to be the person who comes in 2 tight end sets. Again, decent at receiving, not anything to write home about, not a great run blocker or a great pass blocker. If we have to rely on Garrett Selleck for pass blocking or run blocking, it's going to be a really, really long day for the 49ers. Tight end, while typically something that Kyle Shanahan likes to feature, has not been a super featured role, and I think it's just because of a general lack of talent and experience with the 49ers. So you might see George Kittle on a kind of Y over route or something like that, or on a drag route, but he usually runs corners And so it would be interesting to see if we can get him isolated against the linebacker, because he's fast enough to be able to do some damage in the intermediate area of the field.
You guys have a fullback on the roster. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce his name. Do you use
Juice? It's Kyle Juszczyk, but everyone just calls him Juice.
Okay. Do you guys use the fullback position often? And if so, how's Kyle been playing?
So Kyle is by order of magnitude the highest paid fullback in the NFL. His deal was for, I think, $21 million over the course of 4 years. Wow. It's not what you should pay a fullback. And when he was signed, it was like, we really think of him as an offensive weapon. That was the joke, right? It's a joke for fans, but not for Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. And he has been playing like a fullback, and a fullback that isn't even necessarily the best fullback in the NFL. Depending on who we play and depending on the game plan, he does play anywhere between 30 and 50% of the snaps. He is exactly what you would think a fullback will do. He might catch a pass or two out of the backfield. If it's 4th and 1, he might get a fullback dive, which the Kyle Shanahan seems to love the fullback dive on 4th and short. And so, but it's going to be, Kyle Juszczyk and generally a fullback. So I wouldn't expect too much out of him. If he starts blowing up and he has a great game, then things are a little out of whack. But I think that he's exactly what you would think out of a fullback. He just happens to be making $20 million to do it.
Man, that's a lot of money for a fullback.
It is.
All right, you guys play a 4-3 over at San Francisco. Take us through the front four, please.
All right, so the front four is going to be where we have some of the most talent and the most depth. Depending on what your primary offensive formation is going to be, if you're talking about kind of base with a tight end or maybe 2 tight ends and a halfback, you're going to be looking at Solomon Thomas, DeForest Buckner, Earl Mitchell, and Tank Carradine. Now, Solomon Thomas, of course, was our first-round draft pick. He was drafted 3rd overall. You're probably familiar with the name because, of course, that's who we traded with the Bears in order to go down for y'all to get good old Mitchell Mitsubishi Trubisky. And so he is going to be our weak side defensive end, also known as the Leo in the 4-3 scheme that we run. He is a very, very good run defender. Still has some kind of pieces to put together in the pass game, but he is ridiculously athletic, and he can get after the quarterback, especially if he's going up against one-on-one against a tackle that is underperforming. And then you've got DeForest Buckner. DeForest Buckner is the elite player on this team. He plays the 3 technique, and he has been playing it at an elite, like Ndamukong Suh, Aaron Donald level all year. Problem is, he plays on a really crappy team, so he doesn't get the same press that those other 2 players are going to get. Mm-hmm. But DeForest Buckner can disrupt a game, and he can take it over. He is stout in the run game. He is constantly going to draw double teams. Teams might try and run trap plays against him or run wham plays against him, specifically because they're trying to isolate him. It's definitely a joy to watch him play, and I think that Cody Whitehair and Josh Sitton are going to have their hands full if they're going to be going up against DeForest Buckner. Earl Mitchell is our nose tackle. He is not good against the run. He just isn't. Much better against the pass. Fun thing to look for Earl Mitchell is see if he drops in coverage against the Bears. Robert Saleh, our defensive coordinator, loves to rush 3 and look like you're going to rush 4. And so Mitchell will fake like he's going to rush, but then he'll drop into a short middle of the field zone, and the team will eventually just run 3. Take a look if that bowling ball jumps into coverage, because it's kind of a running joke for 49ers fans, and it's pretty funny to watch a bowling ball try and cover the middle of the field. Happens a lot in the red zone. And then the strong side defensive end is going to be Tank Carradine. He is starting there because Eric Armstead, who was, of course, our first-round draft pick a couple of years ago, also on injured reserve. We've got I think we're tied with the Giants for the league lead in number of players on injured reserve, somewhere near 20 or 21. But Tank Carradine just recently came back from injured reserve, and he is a solid defensive end, especially if he's matched up against the tight end. If you're going to try and block Tank Carradine at the 6 technique position with Sims alone, one-on-one, Sims is going to lose that nearly every time. So Tank Carradine, depending on how the Bears decide to play him, could be up for a big game.
Excellent. What about the guys on who come in as replacements? On the depth chart here, you got Sheldon Day, the kid out of Notre Dame. It's actually Elvis Dumervil is still with the squad. So is he getting any playing time?
So Elvis Dumervil is pretty much exclusively a pass rushing specialist, which is exactly what he should be at this point. His overwhelming majority of snaps come when you're in obvious passing downs, and he still can bring it. I mean, he can bring it in limited snaps, and that's exactly what he's done. He is able to get pressure on the quarterback. He's got a pretty solid bull rush, a decent speed rush, and if the Bears are seeing a lot of Elvis Dumerville, that's bad news for the Bears because that means that the Niners are going to be up, or they force them into long down and distance situations, and that's when you see a lot of Elvis Dumerville. So if you're seeing a lot of him on the field, the Niners are probably in a pretty good spot. But he is giving us some quality snaps. Now, when you look across the other backups that come in, Sheldon Day, new acquisition from Jacksonville. A lot of teams put a waiver claim on him, specifically because he's a talented guy. I think Jacksonville just had a lot of really, really good defenders along their defensive line, and their loss was definitely our gain. You've got DJ Jones and Chris Jones. DJ Jones kind of backs up the nose tackle. He's flashed in a couple of really good spots, but I wouldn't say that he's anything to write home about. And same with Chris Jones. Actually, Chris Jones is on injured reserve. Never mind. You lose track of how many of these players are on injured reserve because they seem to all be. Yeah. And then along the defensive end, you've got Lige Douzable. His name looks like pleasure. He's given up most of his snaps to Cassius Marsh, another recent acquisition, and a couple of other players that we have there on the edge. So, I mean, I would say that we've got a decent depth on the line, but definitely the prime position there is going to be DeForest Buckner, Solomon Thomas, and then it's going to be interesting to see what the rotation is with Sheldon Day.
Some excellent building blocks there. And also at the linebacker position, your middle linebacker, Reuben Foster, just won the NFL Rookie of the Month award, despite the fact that he only played 3 games. Talk to me about Foster and the other linebackers on this roster.
So the only real 2 linebackers you've got to worry about are Reuben Foster and Brock Coyle. Eli Harold is the Sam linebacker, but he only comes in on base downs, and the Niners are running nickel or some version of nickel about 65% of their plays. So you're not going to see Harold a whole hell of a lot unless the Bears try and come at us with a lot of Jordan Howard, in which case you may see a lot of Eli Harold. But Reuben Foster plays the will linebacker position, and he is a force of nature. He's still a rookie, but he is incredibly instinctual. He's very, very fast, and he can get his nose to the football. There was one play that we watched last week against Seattle where he ends up covering Tyler Lockett in the slot and is able to carry him and stay in phase 15 to 20 yards downfield. I mean, the dude is just fast, and he plays with so much instincts. It's awesome to watch him play, and he's a whole hell of a lot of fun. He's in the great tradition of 49er linebackers of Patrick Willis and Navarro Bowman. I mean, this is a guy who can suit up and play, and it's really fun to watch him. Brock Coyle is a journeyman linebacker. He is just not great at football, but he plays the mic. You'll see him blitz more often than not, and he's a decent blitzer when he's not tripping over yard lines and falling on his face. But he's not always great at taking on blocks, and he doesn't always take great angles to the ball. So his job is really to try and just hit people and free Foster up to sweep in and clean up and make some damage. He's gotten a little better as time has gone on. Brock Coyle has, but he's not great at the middle linebacker spot.
Okay, you guys have a lot of young players on this roster. I keep seeing rookie. That's pretty amazing. And one of the things that I've been very critical of with the Chicago Bears is that they've kind of been, for the first 2 years of Ryan Pace's general managership here in Chicago, it was like he was trying to fight whether he was rebuilding or trying to win a division title. And so the roster never seemed to have a direction or vision. And finally, in his 3rd year, he drafts his franchise quarterback. But we're going to talk about that a little bit more towards the end of the show. Talk to me now about the 49ers defensive backs.
So the defensive backs are going to be where you have another little bright spot as a rookie. You know, you mentioned all the rookies that are starting, and we actually lead the league in snaps by rookies over the course of the year. And that's just because they're bringing their guys in. They had a very, very good draft class. I mean, when you think about the draft class overall, you've got Solomon Thomas, Reuben Foster, both first-round picks. When you get to Ahkello Witherspoon, one of the defensive backs, he is our best cornerback, and he didn't even play the first 3 weeks of the season because he was still trying to figure out the playbook and trying to figure out the NFL. But Ahkello Witherspoon is another one of those super long, rangy quarterbacks that's very, very fast, but has still got the size to match up with big wide receivers. The 49ers run a 4-3 defense, much in the mold of the Seattle Seahawks. Robert Saleh, of course, was Gus Bradley's linebackers coach when he was with Seattle and then eventually over in Jacksonville. So we run that Gus Bradley version of the defense. And Ahkello Witherspoon has been amazing the last few weeks as a corner. His Pro Football Focus grade is 78, which puts him just at the top end of the average range, but he still has a lot of room to grow. He's been able to lock down a lot of wide receivers that have come his way, and he is definitely our DB1. Now, on the other side of the field, you've got Mr. Johnson, and Dante Johnson is not playing very well. He is still a very big cornerback, but Johnson is probably the person that you're going to want to target, especially if you've got Dontrell Inman over there. I think Inman against Johnson is going to be an advantage Inman, whereas Bellamy is not been playing super well, and Witherspoon I think will be able to handle him. So that's probably where I see advantage Bears is over on that side with Dante Johnson. But you get to the defensive backs, and again, another injury at the defensive back. Our free safety is Antoine Exum Jr. If you're listening right now, you should be asking yourself, who?
Because we know him from his days with the Vikings. Go ahead.
Yeah, but like not very many people do.
Yeah, that's true.
And the thing is, the only reason he's playing is because the starting free safety was Jimmy Ward, and then he got injured. And so then we moved Jaquaski Tart up to the starting free safety role, and then he got injured. And then we had our 6th round defensive back, Adrian Colbert, and he played a game at free safety, and he played it very well, but then he got injured. And so now we signed Antoine Exum Jr. like 4 weeks ago, and he's starting at free safety.
Wow.
So needless to say, not very great. Leon Hall will actually rotate with him at the safety position, and Leon Hall, of course, played last year with the Giants, and he played in spot play as a safety. He's going to play free safety. Leon Hall is in more of the kind of obvious passing downs. Antoine Exum might play in more of the rundowns. And then you've got Eric Reed. And Eric Reed is in his contract year. He is very, very good guarding tight ends, and he's very, very good in coverage. Has a little bit to be desired when coming up in run support, but Reed is one of the leaders on the defense. And if you're going to put him in coverage against the tight end, Reed is probably going to win that matchup. Last week against Jimmy Graham, he only allowed something like 2 receptions for 15 yards, and he intercepted the first pass of the game that was targeted to Jimmy Graham. So Eric Reed is going to be able to shut down whatever tight end he throws away, by and large. And so you've got Reed, who's a super positive. You've got Witherspoon, but then you've got some deficiencies with Johnson and Exum.
This is a very intriguing roster that you 49ers have with a lot of promise with these young players. Do you feel the same way?
I really do. I think that this was the year to tool around and figure out what you had. If you want to play youngsters to figure out if they're going to rise to the occasion or sink, this is the year to do it. This is the year to get valuable experience for Solomon Thomas, for Ahkello Witherspoon, for Reuben Foster. And you look at DeForest Buckner last year. DeForest Buckner played over 1,000 snaps last year. And he had a decent year, but he didn't have, an all-pro year, despite the fact that he was still a super high draft pick. Well, this year, because of all of the experience he got last year, he's been playing at an all-pro level for nearly every single week. Last week was his first real kind of not great game, and we're talking week 12. So I think that you want to get these players seasoned, and you want to give them some experience, because I think this roster is going to be set up to make a super deep playoff push in year 3 of the rebuild. And in year 3, what you're going to have is a lot of rookies who are in their second to last year of their contract. Your first rounder is still going to have 2 years left. Your core is going to be established, and the 49ers have a pretty decent core. You're going to have Jimmy Garoppolo in year 3 of the system, and you're going to have added some more youth. You're maybe going to have a targeted free agent here or there, and that's where the push is really going to come from. It's going to be in year 3, but that only works if these players are playing together and they're able to gel, and you're able to put this nucleus together over the course of the next year or two. So it is an intriguing roster. I'm super happy they turned over as much as they did. They knew they had to get a lot of fresh faces in here, and they've been trying a bunch of things out. Some of them have worked, some of them have not, but I really have appreciated their approach to their roster and the way they've built it this year.
Yeah, I've got a lot of respect for that approach, too. So I need to talk about special teams, particularly because Robbie Gould is your kicker. 2-3 years ago when he was still with the Bears, I was one of the ones leading the charge that it was time to let Robbie Gould. But right now, I am missing Robbie Gould big time. Do I have reason to miss Robbie Gould? How's he been kicking over there?
He's been kicking great. He hasn't missed a whole hell of a lot of field goals, and even the ones that he missed have been really long ones. He's been a very positive addition, especially considering we came from David Akers, and David Akers went to Arizona, and he's not been playing super well in Arizona. You always want to kind of let a kicker go a little early, because once they get super old, then they completely drop off. Mm-hmm. But he's been playing super well. The Niners special teams unit is actually one of the bright spots for the team. If you look at Pro Football Focus's, if you look at Football Outsiders special teams ranking, the Niners actually have been in the top 10 for most of the year. It wasn't until this week, week 12, that they dropped to 11th overall. That's on the strength of Robbie Gould, on the strength of our punter Bradley Pinion, and on the strength of our coverage unit. Now, we did lose one of our star coverage players, Raheem Mostert. He was the third-string running back. We did lose him to injury. He's now on IR. Again, you're detecting a trend. Lots of players on IR, lots of rookie players. But we'll see if that special teams area begins to continue, because the Bears have some electric returners, because I think Cohen returns your punts, right? Tariq Cohen?
Tariq Cohen, correct.
Yeah, and he's got wheels on him. That guy's fast. He's really, really fast. And so it'd be interesting to see what that speed does to stress our special teams.
Boy, this is you've made the game on Sunday much more enjoyable for me. I'm going to be out there, and based on your analysis, I've got a lot of things to look at and really anticipate. Tell me what else about this San Francisco 49ers team is either impressing you or has you dejected. Anything that we Bears fans should know?
Just know that a lot of fans are going to be super happy to see Jimmy Garoppolo. So just please don't kill him. Please don't hurt him. Like, this is literally the future of this team. And we didn't even want him in this game. We wanted him on the shelf in bubble wrap until next year.
Really?
And CJ Beathard, I didn't want to see him at all this year. We know what we have. We're probably going to franchise him. I would much rather have CJ Beathard be the tackling dummy that he is, while this offensive line, while we're able to repair it and rebuild it. So please, Sam Acho, please don't kill him.
I don't think you have to worry about Sam Acho putting his hands on Garoppolo.
Hicks, please don't hit him. Pernell McPhee, please don't kill him. You guys just signed Lamar Houston. Please don't kill him. Just take it easy on Garoppolo. That's really what I think the Niner fans want. I think overall, in terms of what we look at and what we think is going to be interesting in this game, it's going to be whether or not the run game is going to be able to do enough to prevent Jimmy Garoppolo from having to do it all. Because the Bears so far, overall on defense has been really solid, but they've been really good in the run game. So I'm really interested to see if the Niners' run game is able to produce anything against the Bears, because if it can't, then it's going to make it a bit more difficult for Jimmy Garoppolo to put the entire kind of team on his shoulders. The matchup between Brandon Fusco and Akeem Hicks, Brandon Fusco has been a really pleasant surprise for the 49ers. He was a free agent addition from the Giants, and he was thought of just as a kind of a depth guy maybe, but he's been the team's highest graded run block offensive lineman on the season. And Hicks is a monster defender. He's a top 12 graded run defender and has made 25 run tackles within 2 yards of the line of scrimmage. And so preventing a first down. And that's the most in the NFL. So that one-on-one matchup, I think, is going to be super interesting. Is going to be our best run blocker versus your best run defender. Because if Hicks is able to clog up the inside zone, then I think it's going to be a long day for the run game. And if he's not, if Fusco is able to win that matchup, then I think you're going to see some positive flashes from Carlos Hyde and Matt Breida. And then, of course, on the flip side, I'd say, is Mitsubishi Trubisky going to stay in neutral? Right? He's been having more pass attempts the last 3 weeks than he had in the first three. They've seemed to take a little bit of the training wheels off him, but so far he's still not, the second round overall oh my god pick. He's still been very limited in the offense that he can run. Is he going to be able to take advantage of some of the kind of not so good corners, especially given that his offensive weapons are not all that great? I think this is a game where the Niners defense might look better than it is. Especially if we can bottle up Jordan Howard, because if y'all unleash Jordan Howard, then I think it may be game set match.
Well, I got to tell you about Brandon Fusco. I saw him. He played, 6 seasons, I believe, with the Minnesota Vikings, and he was a quality player for them coming off the bench. And then when some of the starters went down with injury, he filled in admirably and actually became a starter there for a certain period of time. So I am not surprised that he's playing well for the San Francisco 49ers team, and that's going to be a great matchup. You're absolutely right. Now let's talk about this trade that you kind of chuckled at when you brought it up, the Solomon Thomas Trubisky trade. What seems to be the feeling there in San Francisco? Do you guys believe that it was highway robbery, or just kind of share your thoughts?
I mean, come on, you know that we robbed you. I mean, we robbed you. Like we had John Lynch basically was on the phone with a ski mask over his face and like a voice modulator, and he was like, "Give me all your picks," and Ryan Pace was like, "Okay." And I mean, if you think about it, the haul that we got a long-time linebacker starter in Reuben Foster. The dude is already playing at such an amazingly high level. Solomon Thomas is going to be another piece that we can build around on the defensive line. And when you look at the quarterback that we drafted in the 3rd round, which is C.J. Beathard, he is actually playing better and has shown some really positive plays when you compare him to Mitch Trubisky. So I wouldn't say that even the quarterback that we had right now is playing worse than Mitch Trubisky. So we've got a better quarterback and an all-star linebacker and potentially an all-star defensive lineman, all because of that trade. So I don't think we lost in any area. Now, I do think Mitch Trubisky is a much better talent than C.J. Beathard, and I do hope that he turns his, that he gets his career kind of on the up and up. And I hope that next year he's got one of those kind of Jared Goff leaps. But I think right now, even if you were only to take the Solomon Thomas, Reuben Foster picks, we absolutely won. But if it turns out that we also got one of the better quarterbacks in the class and got him in the 3rd round, it's not just highway robbery. It's just, I don't even know what's above that. It's like some kind of nefarious heist from a bank or something, some movie that just is all of the gold or something, like The Italian Job or something.
All right, well, you're going to have a lot of tweets from our followers who we call barflies. They're going to be coming after you, especially if Trubisky has a great game on Sunday. And I got to tell you, I mean, the trade, I was not a fan of it when the trigger was pulled. I was not a fan of Trubisky, but having then gone back and looked at all of his college tape, I looked at every snap that he had at college. I saw a quarterback with a lot of potential, who throws a very accurate football, who is really good on the run, and he's got the potential here to become a truly special quarterback. Unfortunately, we have been harping here at the Bears Barroom that the offensive coordinator and head coach are hurting his development with the schemes that he's got the kid running, and they're preaching ball protection so much that it's actually begun to hurt his accuracy when throwing the ball. But hopefully that will be rectified during the off season. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. You were going to offer another thought?
Oh, no, I actually 100% agree that Mitch Trubisky, I think Mitch Trubisky was the best quarterback in this year's draft. I think it was the right pick. I just think Pace could have stood pat at 3 and made the exact same pick and not give up as much as he gave up in order to move up one spot. I do agree with your analysis of Mitch Trubisky 100%. I think he is incredibly accurate. Before the season, we had Steve Palazzolo of Pro Football Focus on our podcast because we were also in the quarterback market as well. And Pro Football Focus does this cool thing where they chart not just the accuracy of the passer, like did he complete it, did he not, was it a throwaway, things like that. But they also chart where the ball location was. Was it in front of the numbers? Was it high? Was it low? And Mitch Trubisky was the most accurate passer in college football, not just on completion percentage when you adjust for drops and interceptable passes and things like that, but also in ball location. Was it outside the numbers? Was it within frame? Those kinds of things. And that shows on tape. Mitch Trubisky is very, very accurate. And I think that skill is one of those skills that is really, really difficult to develop. And so if you've already got it, it just takes time to put all the other stuff together, and you can do that. So I hope, again, I love watching good quarterbacks play, and I hope that Mitch Trubisky ends up being a good one. And I do think, kind of to your point, scheme matters, coaching matters. I think Jared Goff is example number one of how Fisher could ruin a quarterback, and then you get Sean McVay in there, and he's like, no, we're going to make this about you. Let's do this. and it completely changed Jared Goff around. And I think that Mitch Trubisky has the talent to do it. It's just whether or not someone like, Doa Logains is going to be able to do it.
I really appreciate your insight into the San Francisco 49ers, your thoughts on Trubisky. I hope that we get an opportunity to talk again, maybe during before a playoff game in 2018-19. And probably you guys are probably going to get there before we are, the way we're going. But again, I really enjoyed talking to you, Oscar.
Yeah, it'll be fun. I'm going to enjoy it. I'm actually having a Friendsgiving on Sunday with some friends of mine. One of which is a longtime Chicago native who now lives in Austin here, and he's a really good friend of mine. So we'll be watching the game together. He will be decked out in his Bears gear. I will be decked out in my Niners gear. It's going to be a game, man. It's going to be fun.
Well, and when you're watching the game, if you see somebody run out into the field holding a Firefox sign, it might be me running out there. So I'll be tweeting.
One of the funniest things I've heard recently was the Firefox logo. I thought it was so clever. I loved it. Whoever thought of that, I don't know if you're a listener. I don't know if it's you, but it was totally awesome.
Well, we've been running our Firefox campaign for weeks and weeks, and we've got videos up on our website. We've got all sorts of stuff. We even have a rap song called Fire John Fox that has gotten a lot of attention, and we're very proud of it. Draft Dr. Phil Latoshin, one of the key guys here at the bar room, wrote, produced, sung the thing. He's a very talented guy, and so yeah, we're gonna keep the pressure up on the folks at Hallis Hall. We definitely need to move on from the Fox fiasco. All right, Oscar, thank you very much, and I hope we can talk again real soon.
Thanks so much, man.
Okay, take care, Oscar. Okay, Barflies, Oscar's Twitter handle is @BetterRivals. That's BETTER Rivals. Give him a follow and let him know what you think about that Trubisky trade. I'll tell you one thing, in talking to Oscar, it just underlines the need for Pace to fully invest in this rebuilding project, and you cannot do that with John Fox as head coach. So Pace needs to get rid of the old school guy and bring in a new school offensive mind to partner with Trubisky for the next 10 years. And Pace must truly commit to building through the draft. He's talked about it, but he's been trading away draft picks as opposed to collecting draft picks, and that should not happen. Also, stop bringing in broken down free agents. Most of those guys are Band-Aids with worn out adhesives. Go after the Akeem Hicks in free agency, these talented players who are approaching their prime, and not the Quentin Demps players who are on the decline. Okay, make sure you stop by the website, bearsbarroom.com. Kevin Schrader has his player performance grades up. Brett Mailey continues his series on frustrating moments in Bears history. He looks back at the 1995 Steelers-Bears game that was an overtime thriller, but it was a frustrating loss for the Bears. And we also have an excerpt from the new book, If These Walls Could Talk. In that particular chapter that we have up, the authors, Otis Wilson, the former Bear great, and Chet Kopic recount a near fist fight that Otis had with Coach Ditka, and he accuses the coach of being racist. You really need to read that. Make sure you tell others about what we're doing here at the Bar Room with our 4 weekly podcasts, Draft Dr. Phil's original music. He's got another Christmas parody song coming out this weekend, and all the other stuff we do at the Bar Room. I am Aldo Gandia, and remember, if you drink, please do not drive, and always bear down.